There's something nobody ever told you the day the pharmacist handed you that little orange bottle. Something you won't find printed on the label. Something that isn't in that folded paper stuffed inside the box that nobody actually reads. And yet it might be the one thing standing between your pill truly protecting you, or leaving you completely unguarded during the most dangerous hour of your entire day. You've been taking your blood pressure pill faithfully, maybe for years now, every single morning, with your coffee, with your juice, or just with a plain glass of water before you start your day. And like almost everybody I know, you've assumed that simply taking it every day is enough. But what nobody ever sits you down and explains is that the exact moment you swallow that pill and what you have alongside it can completely change how well it actually works. I'm not telling you this because I read it in a magazine somewhere. I'm 71 years old. I've been on blood pressure medication myself for almost 16 years. I've sat in more waiting rooms than I can count. I've buried a husband who had 2 heart attacks. And along the way, I got curious enough to actually ask questions, real questions, to every doctor, nurse, and pharmacist who would give me the time. What I found out changed the way I take my own medicine, and it changed things for my sister, my neighbor, and a good friend from my old bridge club too. So I started writing it all down and sharing it, because I kept thinking, why did nobody ever just sit me down and explain this properly? There's a study I want to tell you about, because it's a big one. Researchers followed more than 19,000 people for 6 years, looking at exactly this question, and what they found was so significant that the cardiologist leading the study called it one of the most ignored risk factors in how we manage high blood pressure in this country. There are 5 timing mistakes that people on this medication make almost every single day without realizing it. Some of them will sound perfectly reasonable to you, the kind of thing you've probably done 100 times without a second thought. But the first one, the one I'm saving for the end, is the one that surprised me the most, because for decades it's been considered the correct, standard way to take this medicine. And there's a very good chance it's exactly what you're doing right now. Stay with me to the end, because what I'm about to share could change a routine you've followed for years without ever knowing it was quietly working against you. Before I go any further, let me ask you something. What time do you take your blood pressure pill? Morning with breakfast? Midday because you forgot earlier? Or at night before bed? Tell me in the comments below. And if you've ever missed a dose and just decided to take 2 to make up for it, tell me that too. You are absolutely not alone in that. I've done it myself. And whatever you share here might be exactly what somebody else watching right now needs to hear. Now, to understand why the timing matters so much, you need to understand something about your own body that most of us were never taught. Your blood pressure isn't one steady number sitting still all day like the temperature in your living room. It rises and falls on its own rhythm, a cycle your body repeats every single day, almost like clockwork. While you sleep, your blood pressure naturally drops. In a healthy person, that nighttime dip is somewhere between 10 and 20% lower than during the day. It's a rest period your heart genuinely needs. But early in the morning, usually somewhere between 4 and 10 o'clock, something happens that can be quite dangerous if you already have high blood pressure. A hormone called cortisol rises, your nervous system switches into a more alert gear, and your heart starts working harder to get your body moving for the day. There's actually a name for this. Doctors call it the morning surge. A study published in a well-known medical journal on hypertension found that this morning surge is responsible for close to half of all strokes and about 40% of all heart attacks that happen in a given day. And here's the part that really stuck with me. As we get older, our artery walls lose up to 30% of their natural flexibility. So that same morning surge that your body could shrug off easily at 40 becomes a much bigger challenge at 70. Your pill needs to be doing its job exactly during that dangerous window. Whether it is or isn't depends entirely on when you take it. Let's start with the first mistake, and I'll be honest, this one caught me off guard when I first heard it, because it involves something as ordinary as your morning coffee. If you take a beta blocker, medicines like metoprolol, atenolol, or carvedilol, that cup of coffee might be working directly against your medication in a way almost nobody ever mentions at your checkup. Think of it like this. Caffeine is like pressing the gas pedal on your heart. It speeds it up, it releases adrenaline, and it pushes your blood pressure up for a little while. Your beta blocker does the opposite job. It slows the heart down and softens how hard it's contracting. When you take your pill and drink your coffee within the same half hour, you're basically stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time. Most of the time, the medication wins that little tug of war. But for people who already have a history of irregular heartbeat, that back and forth between the caffeine pushing and the medicine pulling can cause noticeable fluttering right around the time the caffeine peaks, which is usually 30 to 60 minutes after you drink it. A large study out of a well-respected cardiovascular research program followed over 3,000 patients on beta blockers for 4 years and found that people who drank more than 2 cups of coffee within an hour of their pill had 22% more of these heart flutters compared to people who waited at least 45 minutes. I think about a woman I met at my church group, a retired school teacher, 68 years old, who'd been on her medication for 3 years. Every single morning around 9, she'd feel this strange fluttering in her chest, and she'd convinced herself it was just her nerves. When we sat down and went through her morning step by step, it was obvious. Coffee at 7:30, pill at 7:45. We simply swapped the order. Pill at 7, coffee after 8. 2 weeks later, the fluttering was completely gone. She looked at me and said, "Why did nobody ever ask me what time I drink my coffee?" So here's the rule, simple as it sounds. If you're on a beta blocker, wait at least 45 minutes between your pill and your first cup of coffee. Decaf doesn't cause this problem. If you need your coffee ritual, that's your out. And always take your pill with a full glass of water. It helps it absorb more evenly and avoids those little spikes that cause trouble. The second mistake is one almost everybody has heard of, but most people only know half the story. I can't tell you how many times someone tells me, "Oh, I know, no grapefruit with my pills." And then I ask when they last had a glass of grapefruit juice and they say, 2 days ago, while they've been on their medication for months. That's exactly where the danger hides. Grapefruit has compounds in it called furanocoumarins. Your body has a kind of internal checkpoint, an enzyme that controls how much of your medication actually gets into your bloodstream. Grapefruit shuts that checkpoint down, and here's the part that surprised me. It doesn't wear off in a few hours. It can stay blocked for up to 72 hours after you've had grapefruit or its juice. With that checkpoint disabled, medications like felodipine, nifedipine, or amlodipine don't get processed the way they should. The amount circulating in your blood can double, triple, even go up to 5 times what it's supposed to be. What follows is a sharp drop in blood pressure, dizziness, feeling faint, and for older folks whose blood vessels don't have the same tone they used to, actual fainting spells that can be seriously dangerous. A team of researchers following close to 3,000 patients over 3 years found that people who'd had grapefruit in the previous 72 hours had 31% more episodes of dangerously low blood pressure compared to those who avoided it altogether. I remember hearing about a retired electrician, 72 years old, who'd been fine on his medication for 2 years. His wife started buying a new juice blend at the store that happened to include grapefruit in it, and he never thought to check the label. 3 mornings later, he stood up from breakfast and collapsed right there in the kitchen. It wasn't a heart attack, it wasn't a stroke. His blood pressure had crashed down to 86/52. Once they pieced it together, the cause was plain as day. So if you're on one of these medications, ask your pharmacist directly whether grapefruit interacts with your specific pill. Don't just assume it doesn't apply to you. Swap it for orange juice, apple juice, or plain water. And if you've been taking this kind of medication a while, ask your doctor to check your magnesium levels too. Foods like spinach and almonds are rich in magnesium and can help keep your blood vessels steady without interfering with anything. Now the third one, and I want to say something before I explain it. From the outside, this doesn't look like a medical problem at all. It looks like trouble sleeping. It looks like a trip to the bathroom at 2 in the morning. It looks like just one of those things that happens once you get to a certain age. It isn't. It's actually one of the most preventable causes of serious injury in people over 70, and I mean serious. Water pills, the diuretics, medicines like hydrochlorothiazide, furosemide, and chlorthalidone are some of the most commonly prescribed medications for blood pressure. They tell your kidneys to get rid of extra fluid, which lowers the amount of blood circulating and brings your pressure down. It works well, but when you take it, changes everything about how it feels day to day. A lot of people, either because they forgot the morning dose or nobody ever told them there was a right time, end up taking their water pill in the afternoon or with dinner. That pushes the strongest effect of the medicine right into the middle of the night. Your kidneys are working overtime, your bladder fills up, and you're waking up at 1, 2, 3 in the morning, having to get out of bed in the dark while your blood pressure is shifting because you just stood up too fast. There's a name for that too. It's called orthostatic hypotension, and it affects almost 30% of people over 70. And here's what really should worry you. Falls at night in people over 70 are the leading cause of hip fractures. And hip fractures, listen to this, have a death rate within the first year of somewhere between 20 and 30% in people over 70. 1 in 4 or 5 people who break a hip after 70 will not be alive a year later. That is the real cost of taking your water pill at 6 in the evening instead of the morning. One hospital study affiliated with a major medical school looked at almost 15,000 patients on this kind of medication and found that people taking it after 2 in the afternoon had 44% more nighttime falls that needed emergency care compared to people who took it in the morning. I think of a friend of mine from my old book club, a retired librarian, 74 years old, who'd been waking up 3 times a night for over a year. She'd been told to take her water pill once a day, no specific time given, so naturally she took it with dinner. Once we figured this out together, and she moved it to 8 in the morning, within a week she was sleeping through the whole night for the first time in ages. She called me up and told me it felt like getting her life back. There's really no wiggle room on this one. If you're on a water pill, take it before 10 in the morning. If your doctor has you on 2 doses a day, the second one should never be after 2 in the afternoon. Write yourself a note somewhere you'll actually see it if you need to. And one more little thing, have a banana or a bit of plain yogurt with your morning dose, because water pills can lower your potassium over time, and replacing it naturally helps keep your heartbeat steady. If this kind of practical information is exactly what you've been wishing somebody would just explain to you plainly, hit subscribe. I put out something like this every week. Real information, no jargon, nothing fancy, just what should have been explained to you the day you got that prescription. The fourth mistake is one almost every single person on this kind of medication has done at least once, and most people never mention it because they figure it wasn't that big a deal. You forget your morning pill. You remember at dinner or right before bed, and the thought that pops into your head is, I'll just take 2 now to catch up. For some medications, that's not a huge issue. For others, it can turn into a real emergency. When you double up on certain medications like a calcium channel blocker or a longer-acting one like valsartan or olmesartan, here's what's actually happening inside you. These pills work by relaxing your artery walls and lowering resistance so your blood pressure comes down. 1 dose does that slowly and steadily. 2 at once can cause a sudden sharp drop. A younger person with more flexible arteries can usually handle that. Someone over 65 with less elastic blood vessels and maybe some existing heart trouble can actually lose consciousness from a drop like that, or worse, not get enough blood flow to the heart or the brain for a moment. But there's a quieter version of this same mistake that worries me even more because it goes completely unnoticed. Some people are told to take a medication twice a day, and over time, just because it's easier to remember, they quietly start taking it only once, without ever telling their doctor. The doctor sees decent numbers at the appointment and assumes everything's fine. But the protection that medicine is supposed to give around the clock is really only running at half strength, and problems that could have been prevented simply aren't being prevented. A large study following more than 8,000 people with high blood pressure over 5 years found that people who doubled their dose after forgetting one had 38% more hypertensive emergencies, and people who took their twice-a-day medication inconsistently had 26% more hospital visits for heart-related problems. I remember a man 66 years old, worked construction his whole life with an unpredictable schedule, who'd been on 2 blood pressure medications for 4 years. Over time, he got into the habit of taking 2 pills at night whenever he realized he'd missed the morning one. His wife found him unconscious in the kitchen one day. His blood pressure had dropped to 79/48. It wasn't a heart attack, it wasn't a stroke, it was a completely avoidable double dose. Here's the rule that's easy to remember. If you miss a dose and catch it the same day, take it as soon as you remember, unless your next dose is less than 4 hours away. If it's that close, just skip the missed one and go back to your regular schedule. Never double up without checking with your pharmacist first, because the right answer really does depend on exactly which medication you're taking. Something that's worked wonderfully for a lot of people I know is setting a daily alarm on your phone labeled with the medicine's name and tying it to something you already do every day anyway, like your first meal or brushing your teeth. One study found that this simple habit trick cut missed doses by 63%. And now, the biggest one. The one I saved for last because it surprised me more than anything else I've learned in 16 years of taking this medication. For decades, this has been the standard way doctors have told people to take these pills, and hardly anyone questioned it. I want you to really listen here because this isn't some small scheduling tweak. This is a real gap between how most prescriptions get written and what the actual evidence shows. For generations, the default instruction has simply been, take it once a day in the morning. That habit came from a time when we didn't understand the body's daily rhythms nearly as well as we do now. Today we understand it much better, and what the evidence shows is hard to just brush aside. Your blood pressure follows a rhythm as reliable as a clock. It drops while you sleep, and then rises sharply in the early morning as that cortisol kicks in, and your body gears up for the day. That window is the single most dangerous stretch of your whole 24 hours. It's when most heart attacks and strokes happen. Now think about what a morning pill actually does. You take it at 7 or 8 in the morning. It takes an hour or 2 to get into your system. It reaches its strongest point around 9 or 10, right as that morning surge is already starting to fade on its own. But by 4 or 5 the next morning, when the surge is starting to build again, your medication has already been wearing off for 18-20 hours. The exact moment you need the most protection is the exact moment your pill is at its weakest. Taking it at night flips that whole picture around. If you take it at 10 at night, by 4 in the morning it's already at its strongest. It's fully active right through that morning surge. The surge runs straight into a wall instead of getting through. Your arteries are protected exactly when they need it most. This isn't just something I heard secondhand either. The largest study ever done on this exact question followed over 19,000 adults with high blood pressure for an average of more than 6 years. Half took their pill at bedtime, half in the morning. The results were striking. The bedtime group had 45% fewer cardiovascular deaths, heart attacks, heart failure cases, and strokes compared to the morning group. 45%. That's not a small difference. That's the kind of number that should change how every single prescription gets written. Another large review published a few years later, looking at 11 different studies with over 21,000 patients combined, found the same pattern. Evening dosing gave better nighttime blood pressure control, better suppression of that morning surge, and meaningfully better outcomes down the road. There's a woman I know, 79 years old, who took her pill every single morning at 8 for 11 years straight. Her readings at the doctor's office always looked fine, but when her cardiologist finally put her on a 24-hour monitor she could wear at home, the real story came out. Every single morning between 5 and 7, her blood pressure was spiking to 162/94 without fail. She was controlled at exactly the wrong time of day. They switched her to a nighttime dose, and 3 months later the monitor showed that morning spike had completely disappeared. Her cardiologist told her the numbers looked better than they had in over 10 years. She told me she wished somebody had explained this to her a decade earlier. Now, I want to be completely honest with you here, because you deserve the whole picture, not just the neat version. That original big study has actually been questioned by some researchers over how it was conducted. A later large study in the UK, with more than 21,000 patients, didn't find a significant difference between morning and evening dosing on the major outcomes. So the science isn't fully settled. What is clear is this: taking it at night hasn't been shown to cause harm, and for a lot of people whose blood pressure doesn't dip properly at night the way it's supposed to, it can make a real measurable difference. The only way to actually know if that's you is to ask your doctor for a 24-hour blood pressure monitor you wear at home. That test tells the full story of your own pattern, and it's the best tool there is for figuring out exactly when you should be taking your medicine. So here's the single most important thing you can do after watching this. At your very next appointment, just ask, should I be taking my blood pressure medication at night instead of the morning? And then follow it up with, would a 24-hour monitor help us figure that out? That one conversation could matter more than any other change to your treatment in years. And if you do end up switching to nighttime, take it about 30 minutes before you actually get into bed, not once you're already lying down. That gives it time to start absorbing properly. And keep it at the same time every night. Being consistent matters just as much as which time you pick. I want to talk to you for a second, not as somebody giving you a lecture, but just as another person who's been through this. Every single one of you watching is carrying something, a prescription you've had for years, a quiet worry you don't always know how to bring up, a body that doesn't quite respond the way it used to, and leaves you with more questions than answers some days. I understand that, I live it too. Here's what I want you to walk away with. The fact that we even have medications that can step into one of our body's most important daily rhythms and cut the risk of heart attack and stroke by 30, 40, even 45%. That's genuinely remarkable. You are not failing because you need to take a pill every day. You're using a tool, and like any tool, how you use it matters just as much as using it at all. Getting older is going to happen no matter what. Some of it we can't change. But the morning surge your body faces every day, the timing your medicine needs to actually cover you, the hidden trouble in your grapefruit juice or your morning coffee, none of that is set in stone. Those are things you can actually manage once you know about them. I share all this because I believe everybody deserves to understand what's happening in their own body at 50, 60, 70, 80, and beyond. Nobody should feel like they need a medical degree just to ask the right question at their own appointment. So tell me, which of these 5 mistakes surprised you the most? Which one are you going to fix before your next dose? Let me know in the comments, and tell me your age too. What you've been through with your own health might be exactly what somebody else reading this needs to hear today. If this gave you something your last doctor's visit didn't, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I put these out every week. And please, share this with somebody you know who's on blood pressure medication, a parent, a spouse, a friend, somebody who might have been doing one of these 5 things for years without ever knowing. Sometimes one little piece of information is enough to change a habit, and that one habit can end up changing everything. Thank you for spending this time with me. This is exactly the kind of conversation I wish somebody had had with me 16 years ago.